Please welcome the head of the largest and founding chapter of the Thai global brand. They recently hosted ThaiCon, which is the largest technology conference in the world. If you have a chance to check it out, their lineup is superb and it is just massive. And with us today to introduce our next session is the president of Thai Silicon Valley, Anita Manwani. Anita, thank you.
Thank you, firstly, for inviting me here and being part of Naren's legacy. I was fortunate, my husband and I were very fortunate that we were at those dinner parties where you always had the differing opinion and thought experiment conversations that we just heard about. So I think Naren was truly a friend, not just a friend of ours, but he was a friend of Thai. He was a friend of Silicon Valley, and most importantly, he was the friend of every other curious mind that had an entrepreneurial spirit across the globe. And Thai, just as, thank you for that introduction. Thai, as you know, has been around for 31 years. This is the founding chapter of Thai, and in keeping with some of these conversations of Silicon Valley and its technology ties with India, our most recent conversation was at ThaiCon 4 weeks ago, and we had a rocket ship track that was led by Asha Jadeja. And it was amazing because we had, standing room only. And in addition, the conversations were around getting America ready for manufacturing again. Where do you think that conversation went back to supply chains and India? More than that, we had an unprecedented number of people, startups, founders, investors, academics, state agencies, bureaucrats who attended ThaiCon. And all of them come back and they all want to have curated sessions with the help of Thai Silicon Valley to get that Silicon Valley experience. So yes, India is on the rise, but yes, Silicon Valley has a very big role to play in those technology ties. And as I think of the impact that organizations like Thai have had, it's in the United States, 25,000 entrepreneurs have been touched. More than $1 trillion of wealth has been influenced. And then most importantly, 2 million jobs have been created. And speaking of 2 million jobs, what you're going to be hearing today is those ties and 2 million jobs being created by one of our entrepreneurs or enabled by one of the entrepreneurs. And thank you to WestBridge Capital. I apologize, Samir Chadha could not be here in person, but we have another of his senior execs from the firm here. And I'm so delighted to have Manthan Shah, SVP at WestBridge Capital, and he heads up all of the SaaS investments. And as many of you know, WestBridge has been very involved with investments in India and over the years, over the last 2 decades. And as we hear from Jonathan, he's really bringing every day, adding to those 2 million people on Touring. He's a founder and CEO and a serial entrepreneur and a friend of Thai. He tells me he's heard of Thai, he's been interacting with Thai. So I'm going to make a public invitation to you, Jonathan, to come back and join us and inspire some of the younger entrepreneurs yet to come. So over to you. Take this conversation away. Tell us more about the details of global talent acquisition. Back in my days, it was only around setting up captive centers around Y2K it's all evolved, and now you're going to bring technology to connect that global talent. Over to you.
Thank you, Anita.
Hey, can you guys hear me? Yeah. Thanks, Anita, for that wonderful introduction and talking about Thai. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Asia Society, for having us. I'm glad we're honoring Naren, who's probably a very inspiring figure for a young investor like me. And the few times that I've met him, I've learned a great deal for him. So glad to be part of this session to honor him. Like Anita mentioned, we at Westbridge are glad to be part of the U.S. India corridor, a place where we are very excited to seed a lot of companies and invest in a lot of companies like Turing, who's one of our most awesome investments. And I let Jonathan. I obviously know the company. I've been part of the investment from day one, but I let Jonathan talk about what's the Turing story before we get into some of the discussion points around the U.S. India corridor. Jonathan, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Manthan. And thank you, Anita. I remember Thai really well because when I was at Stanford, the first tech conference I attended was Thai. And at that time, for me, it was like I wanted to meet some Indian VCs, and there were 3 VCs there. I was very excited. It was Rajiv Motwani, Ravi Matre, and Naveen Chadha. And it's so awesome now, like, now I'm dating myself, because this was 2007 or something. But it's so awesome now to see so many awesome Indian investors, Indian CEOs. It doesn't feel like, I don't know, it feels more normal. Like, I don't feel like it doesn't feel very outsidery anymore, which is great. And thank you, Manthan, for that intro. And in terms of the Turing story, uh, I'd say the moment of inception for Turing was actually the year 2012. My co-founder Vijay and I, who I'd met while at Stanford, we started this AI company that did personalized content recommendations. And I remember that year distinctly because it was the first time I thought I could actually fail, and our startup was in trouble because although we were growing really fast, we had about 40 million users. We were struggling to hire great engineering talent because we were in a fist fight with every company in the Bay Area for great engineers. Like, how many of you think it's hard to hire great engineers in the Bay Area? It's kind of tough,
The
right?
others
That
have
is,
not tried, I guess.
yes. So at the time, we took the contrarian decision of looking for Silicon Valley caliber talent in places that nobody was looking. So we decided we're going to look for awesome engineers in India, Canada, parts of Europe. And it was that decision that was so key to helping us raise a successful Series A, and eventually the company had a successful acquisition. So after that, I took some time off to recharge, figure out what I wanted to do. I even contemplated going to the dark side, becoming an investor. Then I decided I'll do that later. And when I was thinking about what I wanted to do, it became very clear that this problem of finding great engineering talent at scale is so widespread. So we decided to start a company that's the world's first AI-powered tech services company. So it's a product where you can push a button to spin up your engineering team instantly. And we have 2 offerings. Staff augmentation, where if you need engineers, you could push a button and get them from Turing, or you could do entire projects on top of Turing. And we've just seen this incredible growth. Most recently, the company raised at a 4 billion valuation cap, and we kind of grew 1 to 100 million in revenues in about 3.5 years. Part of it was partnering with wonderful firms like WestBridge Foundation Capital. I work closely with Sumir and Manthan at WestBridge. And part of it is we got lucky. There were these incredible tailwinds around remote work and distributed teams that really accelerated our growth. Today, Turing has about 2 million developers, and we're growing by about 80,000 software engineers every month. And does anyone want to guess what's the country where most of our developers are from? Okay. Japan. Okay, I was just kidding. India, right? And what a wonderful time to be alive. And our mission at Turing is to use AI to unleash the world's untapped human potential. And it's been exciting. Also partnering with WestBridge, given their investments in Global Logic, Cognizant, etc. We're kind of building that AI first Accenture.
That's awesome, Jonathan. And no, it's been wonderful seeing the journey for the last 3 years and many more years to come. Actually, you make a very interesting point. Turing, because of its business model, could get engineers from anywhere in the world. You sort of look at all the engineers out there, use AI to vet them, and then pick the best of the best, right? It's obviously well known that India has a lot of engineers, but there's always been a question whether they are the best quality engineers or not. So could you talk a bit about, it's very interesting to see still you have the most engineers coming from India. That speaks about the quality of engineers in India, but we'd love to learn more about what's your been observations there.
Thank you, Manthan. So India is our number one geography, both in terms of quantity as well as quality of engineers. And I would say about 25% of that 2 million developer pool are from India. And at Turing, we use AI to evaluate engineers. We build what we call deep developer profiles. These are detailed, comprehensive, continuously updating vector representations of a developer's strengths and areas for improvement. So we evaluate a developer along their computer science foundations, their expertise in specific tech stacks, and we're also the first and only platform that evaluates developers for non-technical behavioral skills like project management, communication skills, stakeholder management, things like that, which are particularly important for remote work. And what I see is India has like a really wide range of skill sets that developers thrive in. For example, like our vetting really boils down to 3 dimensions, like every role you can imagine, like front end, back end, mobile, AI, data science, etc. Every tech stack you can imagine, like React, Node, Python, etc. Every seniority level you can imagine, like IC, tech lead manager, eng manager, etc. And it used to be, like let's say 5, 10 years ago, that if you wanted senior engineers, you had to look in Silicon Valley. But I think in the last decade or so, and you, Manthan, know this better than others, there've been this awesome crop of Indian unicorns, Indian tech companies, and India already has great engineering schools. So these great engineers went and worked for these great companies, and they've grown up. Like many of them have sort of leveled up. And how do you become a senior engineer? You become a senior engineer by working for great managers at high growth companies and experiencing scale. And now I feel like an increasing number of Indian engineers experience scale. And we see this all the time. Like Turing has clients like Disney, Johnson & Johnson, Rivian, etc. And Indian engineers are in high demand, right? And they have that perfect trifecta in many ways of strong technical skills, strong communication skills, and a really incredible work ethic.
Oh, that's a great point. And in fact, I know this, but within India, a lot of our engineers come from tier 2, tier 3 cities, which is one of the points we were talking about earlier. So fantastic to see that. To make a great tech company alongside engineers, you need other talent as well, product management, product marketing, and a bunch of other roles. In your experience leveraging India for those roles as well, how have you seen talent coming out of India to be? Because that's critical to build a great company as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Manthan. And when you look at product managers, engineers, etc., product management is like an interesting role where you don't really learn that in school, right? The way to become a great product manager is to work for great product companies and product companies that are successful so that you have some data and scale and you learn the right lessons. And even here, like we are seeing an increase in product managers from India. On Turing's platform too, we've started offering product managers, data scientists, in addition to engineers. And much like the rising tide that's lifting the seniority level of engineers, we're seeing the boom in the Indian tech industry also lifting like the pool of product managers that India produces. At Turing, our biggest geography, like for Turing internal, our own R&D, the largest geography for engineering, product management, and data science is India. I mean, we have some senior leadership in the Bay Area and in New York, but India is still quite significant. One thing that I'm personally excited about is so how many of you are following what's going on in generative AI in like the last couple of months? And you have to spend time to keep up, right? Like I feel like even if I were doing a PhD in generative AI, you'd have to do some work to catch up every week. Now, the thing that I'm noticing for product management and skills like that is um, AI is going to add leverage to almost every job. There will be almost no job that will be untouched by AI. Every job is going to transform, including a product manager, including a software engineer. Every job will have chat GPT or like a generative AI system in the loop. And I think these AI based copilot systems will be a massive accelerator for junior mid level talent to take a step up. A junior PM, optimally leveraged by ChatGPT, would at least perform one or two levels above. I don't think we're at the state where it's full automation. We're not at level 5 autonomy yet. But I think it definitely adds significant leverage. We see some AI tools that we use at Turing to make the job of creating like a PRD, like a product requirements document, so much more efficient. Estimation of effort, estimation of resources in terms of dollars and people, so much more efficient. So I think these tools will also be helpful for Indian talent and sort of help them like add at least 3 or 4 years to their seniority level.
That's an excellent point, Jonathan, and that's a great segue. I mean, we can't not talk about AI in sort of today's what's happening in day to day, and companies like OpenAI and Bard and Cohere and so many companies in race to build the best LLMs, kind of to ensure that they have the leadership. And I know you have a unique perspective. We were talking about how they are leveraging India to sort of be ahead of the race, and how Turing is also playing a role. So it would be great to share your perspective on that.
Yep. Thank you, Manthan. I feel like this is such an exciting time to be alive. And I feel fortunate that Turing's right in the middle of this, where we use AI ourselves for vetting developers, matching developers to the right opportunities. And now we are starting to use AI to speed up software development itself. We want a Turing team to be a team that has like an AI powered exoskeleton that's so much more faster, more efficient. So it's super exciting. We also think AI transformation is the new digital transformation. Every company will need to be an AI company. Every company is going to need an AI strategy. And we're starting to advise some of our clients on what their product roadmap should look like in this AI first era. Um, is anybody building companies in AI in this group? Great, great. And it's such an awesome time to be alive.
Yeah, Jonathan. And one more point that you had mentioned, which I'd like to share with the group, is that obviously these LLMs are only as good as the data that goes inside those LLMs. And Turing, working with few of those biggest of the big players without naming names, are leveraging India to get a bunch of engineers to feed in those sort of code, which will help build their co-pilot and build the and sort of engines which will power that. So India is using data, which is obviously critical to their advantage.
That's exactly right, Manthan. So there are some wonderful companies building LLMs. Manthan mentioned a few like OpenAI, Cohere, Google Bard. Amazon has something called Code Whisperer. I think for a lot of these LLM systems, particularly for writing code, a platform like Turing, like where you have access to millions of developers from a wide variety of role types, like if you want to give AI superpowers to a front-end developer versus a back-end developer, a wide variety of programming languages, a wide diversity of skill levels is really critical. And I think this is going to be an exciting area because Turing offers a way to be a source of training data that's infinitely configurable. You can tailor it however you like, infinitely scalable, and very, very cost efficient. And unlike with LLMs, I think we are reaching a stage where the public internet is already tapped out. Like everyone's crawled the public internet, public GitHub profiles. And I think the next wave of innovation will come from companies figuring out ways to create proprietary data that they own so that there are no IP confidentiality issues. And they can tune what data they collect in terms of what adds maximum information gain to their models. Different models have different gaps, and with a platform like Turing, you can configure exactly where you want to collect training data and really scale that up.
That's awesome, Jonathan. I think also one of the things we were talking about earlier, folks in the panel, was about the fact that India has this such a vibrant tech ecosystem. You obviously have been a serial entrepreneur yourself, Jonathan. You did your undergrad in India, moved here, so you kind of seen the ecosystem at both places. Please share your perspective on how easy or still difficult it is to build a US India company, or what have you seen has changed which sort of enables folks coming from India to build a company in US or from India for US, and your thoughts on that.
Thank you, Manthan. In terms of what's changed, I think at least when I was at Stanford, like around 2007ish or so, I feel like there wasn't a lot of even at that time there wasn't a lot of knowledge, widespread knowledge around how you can start a company on an F1 student visa. Right? I remember even in the I was told that you couldn't, but then it turned out you can. You just have to raise capital first, have the company be in a position to sponsor your H-1B, and then do it. It's more hoops to jump through, but it can be done. So I think, and at that time, like I said, I think the Indian investor network, the Indian sort of CEO, successful founder network was also relatively small. I think the thing that has changed is, I think one inflection point in my mind was Y Combinator and the explosion of seed stage startups, like around 2010 or so. I think it made starting a company very easy, and sort of the obvious things you need to do to start a company became more democratized. And I think that lifted a lot of founders, and Indian founders particularly benefited. I recall at Stanford seeing there's a lot of Asian kids like at school, but I didn't see a similar number of startups at the time. But now I think it's catching up. Now I think it kind of matches the engineering class a little more, which is great. Um, the I also recall. And I think it was around 2010 or later, all these Indian unicorns getting created, like Snapdeal and Flipkart and all of that, like that also created a lot of entrepreneurs and people who joined a rocket ship, made some money. Now they kind of get a taste of that and they want to start their own thing. And I think that created some positive feedback loops. In terms of what I see today, I'm curious about this from your standpoint, Manthan. Like, I do see a bunch of my friends who are in India start companies in India, but when they reach the scale up phase, they move and relocate here. Like when it's almost like they do the 0 to 1 in India and the 1 to N they try to do it here, and they kind of relocate to the Bay Area most often. I guess I haven't seen too many companies in India but go after like the US market. That still seems to be the case. Either they stay in India and go after the Indian market, or when they kind of want to go global, they kind of come over. I'm looking forward to seeing like the first Indian consumer internet breakout company. Like imagine like a Pinterest or a Snap. That's just a company like that that's global that starts there. Although consumer internet is very hard, like after Pinterest, there's probably been nothing since the last 10 years in terms of something that has made it to the 7 apps you use daily. So that may be too tough. I'm curious, what have you seen shift, Manthan? Since WestBridge, of course, like is the largest firm investing in the U.S. India corridor. It's a $7 billion fund. You probably have more data than anybody on the planet on what the shift that we're seeing is about.
No, I think the shift is definitely happening. I think software is a place where I think a lot of Indian companies are just being the first to innovate, be the category leaders coming out of India. And to your point, there used to be a model where you first build in India, get some product market fit, then move to the US because this is obviously 10x bigger market. We also see folks like yourself actually, and folks who literally just start the company by moving here because they have that courage. There is an ecosystem of investors, fellow entrepreneurs, folks to sort of help them find their footing when they move here, as well as the fact that they have the understanding of seeing some of the successes like Zoho and Freshworks and some of the other very interesting companies built out of India, to know what it takes, what's the playbook to actually build a successful software company. So we are actually big believers of US India corridor and software being like a very interesting place where a lot of companies will be built grounds up. And the most exciting thing is, instead of just sort of following one of the models which has worked and replicating a low cost option in India, I think we are seeing a lot of category defining companies and category leaders, companies like Postman, companies like BrowserStack, companies like Innovator, who are sort of, the founders are moving here day one, starting a company and just sort of beating everyone here to that. So it's a very exciting time, to your point. And one of the, actually to that point, obviously we have lots of different kind of folks in the room, investors, entrepreneurs, folks in policy, and so on and so forth. What's your take on what should we all be doing to help sort of fuel the ecosystem? And I'm kind of seeing and looking for inspiration from folks. Obviously, the Israel tech ecosystem is very, very powerful, and they sort of do a great job. So I think, what are the things to learn? And when you talk to fellow entrepreneurs or other folks, what do you feel is like all of us should be doing to sort of nurture the ecosystem even more?
Yeah. I think this is where I think organizations like TIE and others play an important role too. I think we have to build a strong community of, I think that trifecta of founders, successful founders, investors, and the next generation, like having a good sort of mentorship and community in that network. I think that's really key. I also think it would be, like, I really think today, if you are starting a tech company, the best formula is to maybe for the first handful of senior engineers or senior execs, maybe maybe you could stay in the Bay Area or in New York, but I would say for the next 50 or the next 100 to really expand in India, like particularly for your engineering talent. When I had a conversation 2 weeks back, Manthan, with Parag, the former CEO of Twitter, his view is that the best his formula for a good tech company is build out of India. Like build out of India, maybe like have the minimal sort of footprint in Silicon Valley or in New York, but really all in on India, right? And which is amazing. And I think it's an interesting time. Like when I reflect, I mean, we used to think that you have to live in Silicon Valley. Or, I mean, Sand Hill Road is right here. But when I really reflect on, I mean, Turing's raised about 144 million. Almost 140 million of that was raised over Zoom, right? So I didn't have to live near Sand Hill Road. I could have lived in India, flown to meet Sumir and Manthan, and had a good walk, and then. So maybe I'm even incorrect. Maybe even the first 5 people, maybe they don't have to be in the Bay Area either. Like we truly live in a boundaryless world where you can build from anywhere, fundraise from anywhere. Maybe sales, maybe you have to be close to your clients, but I don't know, who knows?
Yeah, and I think to that point also, I think every one of us have a great Rolodex. I think just making sure so that we use that for the founders who come here day one, sort of help them make sure that they find their footing, I think is going to be incredibly important as we look for more and more successes. I think couple of other perspectives, Jonathan, which is very interesting to add on what's happening in the US India corridor. India, not just for talent, but as a market, is also coming up. And we are seeing that firsthand as folks who invest in companies who sell into India as well. And what we are excited for is to also help companies in US who are purely US help find market in India as well. So that just strengthen the sort of opportunity for the corridor to have more and more successes. And I think what is very interesting is Indian sort of big companies in India who are going to be the potential big buyers of technology are leapfrogging from no technology to directly using the best in class. So instead of in US where you have to go to enterprise and tell them to replace their older legacy system to have a new system, in India they don't have any system in most cases. So adopting the best in class technology is actually in that sense not a very hard sell. So we are seeing that as well, and so as a firm we are excited for that as well. I think this was very, very helpful, Jonathan. Hopefully everyone enjoyed. We are going to go to question and answers to sort of see if there are things that Jonathan or us we can answer as well.
And while we wait for the first question, Manthan, I have one for you.
Yeah,
So
please.
what do you think of India's future in AI, like from a venture capital perspective? Do you think we'll have OpenAI-like companies coming from India?
Well, that's a tough one. I certainly hope so. As an investor, I'm pretty excited by what's happening. I think two parts to that. One is the infrastructure layer, which is what the hyperscalers and open AIs of the world are. Uh, I don't know if India has that kind of sort of heads up that the folks here have in terms of building those companies, but the applications on top of that, especially using the power of data that we have, some of the companies that we have in our portfolio as well have just enormous amount of data because WhatsApp is big in India and a lot of messages over there and so on and so forth. So I think the applications built on those companies, and I think India can be truly innovative because we are leapfrogging to the point I was making earlier. I'm very excited, and we're already seeing very young, interesting companies, but early days, early days.
Hi, my name is Mihir Parikh. I'm with Nishit Desai Associates, leading the Palo Alto office. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, AJ Society, for bringing young, energetic, entrepreneurs and investors to us. You talked about rocket ship. Anita talked about rocket ship. Let me change the tech perspective. India recently announced space policy. India has 2% market share, but 60 years of history in space, right? India wants to go from 2% to 10% in next 3 years. I think any VC will take that, right? 2% to 10%, 5x growth itself, while the market is growing itself. So when we talk about Silicon Valley and India tech ties, what is your view on how we can go beyond IT and go into this space technology where India is really trying to push the boundaries?
Jonathan, go ahead if you want.
So, firstly, we are reaching an era where every company, it used to be the case that every company is a technology company. Now, I think every company has to be an AI company. Space technology is no different. Tesla's not really a car company, it's like an AI company that's making cars. So the good thing is, it all comes down to who has the best computer science talent, who has the best software engineers. I think that's the foundation. And I think India's off to a great start there. We have great engineering talent, great engineering institutions. And I think it's going to need, I feel like the venture capital industry in India, should grow and become even bigger. I mean, I know it used to be that we'd call LA Silicon Beach, and there was something called Silicon Alley in New York. I think India is going to be like a Silicon Peninsula. Like the entire country is like brimming with talent and ambition. I think strategic deployment of capital, backing young entrepreneurs. Now they have access to good mentorship too, because there have been successful companies built there. So it used to be that the good thing in Silicon Valley was you had access to good mentors, but I think now India has that too. I think capital, along with the right mentorship, building maybe more events that bring people from Silicon Valley and in India together, like for more cross-functional learning. I think those types of, I'm very bullish on India in all things technology, like space technology notwithstanding. As we head towards a boundaryless world where you live doesn't matter in terms of your ability to deliver services, I think it's gonna, I mean, we like to say labor arbitrage, right? I think labor arbitrage exists in a massive way in everything. Like when you look at the cost of, I mean, India's space program, like in terms of the value per dollar, it's remarkable, right? It's amazing, and it's not surprising that it is that way. So I'm very, very excited. So I think more capital, more mentorship, more cross-learning between the two communities, I think would be helpful. Manthan, would love to hear your...
No, I think you answered well. Nothing to add to him.
There's probably some engineers from SpaceX today that probably have everything that they need. Now, I mean, they can raise capital. They have the know-how. They have access to the talent. At some point, hopefully they go back and do something wonderful in India as well.
I'm sure already folks are doing that.
Yeah, fascinating and excellent presentation. Very interesting. I have many questions. Three, I could do eeny, meeny, miny, mo. But given the time, I'll just ask one, which is I spent many years in NASCOM, and among other things, we were always concerned about engineering talent, etc. And technology essentially comes down to human being.
Yes.
Now, on the one hand, and we had a gentleman here say that 50% of Indian talent engineers are unemployable, or something like that was made. On the other hand, I hear and I know that India is a surfeit of excellent talent. It's the biggest talent pool. So, given that you have all this database, what is it in? Could you give a quantitative sense of where is it that India's competitive talent is, best deployed? Let me put this, because I think it's the biggest national policy issue today.
Yeah.
And I'm not just talking about the IITs. I'm an IIT graduate. I'm looking up and down the ladder, because I think you are in a better position than almost anybody, given what you've mentioned, to make a sort of a hard estimate.
Yeah, hardest is the question on how good is Indian talent in general, or like what is?
Yeah, how good is India? Some people will tell you in India, we have produced a lot of engineers, most are unemployed.
Yeah.
On the other hand, a lot of people say that's the best place to find talent.
Yeah.
That's the only place you can scale up.
Yeah.
So I want to know where's the truth?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the intellectually honest answer is that it's given the data that we see, it's hard to answer exactly what you're saying because there's some selection bias. So one way we measure like how good talent is by, so at Turing we are vetting engineers, right? We are vetting them for front end, back end, mobile, AI, data science, etc. Different tech stacks, different seniority levels. So we used to have a metric of like quality per dollar, for lack of a better word, quality per dollar. In quality per dollar, unfortunately, I say this as a proud resident of Palo Alto. Palo Alto will be pretty low. I mean, not because the quality is bad, but it's like there's so little supply, so much demand, so everything is a little bit overpriced, right? So on that note, and you have to control for many different variables. You have to control for the seniority level of a person. How do you compare like a IC3 with an IC4? How do you compare a front-end engineer with a back-end engineer, an AI engineer with a data scientist? So that adds a bit of a wrinkle. But I can tell you in the most controlled sort of ways you could look at it, India was right up there. Like, I don't know if it was exactly number one, but it's right up there. And even India, like Bangalore, for example, on quality per dollar is not as high as some of the smaller, as Coimbatore, or like some of these smaller cities, where on quality per dollar, it'll do really well. And matching is also an important problem. So if you were an engineer growing up in, let's say, Coimbatore, maybe there was no tech company that you could have worked at like at that time. You were probably unemployed because you could have been an awesome software engineer, but there might have been one dev shop near your place, and that was it. I think we are reaching an exciting time where that engineer in Coimbatore like can now be working at Disney or Johnson & Johnson or Pepsi or any of these companies with remote work and distributed teams. I think that 50% number will also change. Your opportunity radius is no longer jobs you can drive to with a car, it's the entire planet, right? Particularly for software companies. Hardware companies, unfortunately, have it harder. So quantitatively, absolutely, like I would say Indian talent, to oversimplify, is sort of most in demand. I would say though, LATAM is really rising, like Brazil, Argentina, Colombia, Mexico is really rising because of the overlap with North America. It becomes very good. Africa is also climbing, although Africa is maybe like at least 10 years behind. So they started a little late, but it's developing. They're growing too, which is wonderful to see.
Yeah, I think that comment was also, I think, for the entire employable universe. So hard to say if engineers also have similar trend. Uh, y- sure, sure. And I think one more perspective. I think there's a lot of work that the companies themselves need to do to right skill the engineers coming out of the universities to make them employable, because it's also their prerogative to figure out, what they need from those engineers, and sort of, I think Zoho, one of the companies, does this well by having their own sort of training centers. But I think a lot of companies have to do that as well. It's a joint effort from everyone. Go ahead, Jonathan. Sorry. Yeah.
So I think LLMs are at this exciting stage where, unlike predictive AI, where you kind of knew the boundaries of what the thing can do, right? You've done supervised learning, you've given it positive, negative examples, you kind of know what will happen. With generative AI, the thing I find fascinating is like, when I sit across from senior researchers working on this at OpenAI, many of these other companies, they don't know what are the things that it can do. It truly feels like an emergent behavior of a system. So it's like every week, like we're discovering new capabilities that we can now do. I think I would put it into two categories in terms of where we already know there is a productivity gain and where where it's still open-ended. In the stuff where we see immediate lift, a software engineer's productivity today has already gone up by 10 to 30%. It's already gone up. We've measured it. It's already there. You don't have to do anything. You just use GitHub Copilot X, and Google Bard has similar tools. 10 to 30% productivity lift. Totally different question on how you measure productivity, but that's we'll get there later. Um, that's obvious. If you're a content marketer, like generating blog posts, SEO articles, etc., probably a 10x productivity lift right off the bat, right? Unfortunately, the rough side of this is there'll probably be some job displacement. For some of these content marketing SEO jobs, if you initially thought you had to hire 100 people, now probably you can do it with 10 or less, right? And I feel like AI does really well with these, I call them soft failure problems versus hard failure problems. Self-driving car is like a hard failure problem. If you're 99.9% accuracy, it doesn't work. But SEO, like a writing assistant, is a soft failure problem. Coding is a soft failure problem. You just need somebody to eliminate writer's block for your version of the job. I do think that every job will be transformed by AI, like every job. All of us, if we are not already using Chat GPT-like systems daily, we are probably not using them optimally enough. Like I use it almost.
You should tell what you were telling me on what was the latest use case for you.
Oh, yes. So we have a 1.5-year-old daughter, and we're having another daughter in September. And I was asking ChatGPT for name recommendations, giving patterns of our daughter's name and other names, and it was pretty good. And what was kind of eerie was it guessed our first recommendation. Like whatever was our current name that we were going to give, like that's what it came up with. It's kind of cool. Other easy areas for automation, Anita, are, I would say, customer support. I think we're already seeing that. Automating like more manual things like Salesforce data entry, we're already seeing stuff there. I think in a lot of these creative jobs, I think writer's block will be eliminated. Like I have friends building, trying to use AI to make movies, right? Like I think there's probably a Pixar, that if Pixar were built today, it probably won't be, it'll probably be based on AI to make the whole process more efficient.
Great. I think, no, I have nothing to add to what excellent perspective Jonathan had. I think the biggest thing is to just ensure that we keep, as investors, sort of finding the great companies that are coming out of the US India corridor, funding them so that they have the means to go against some of the US competitors that we talked about. But we can take one last question. I think a lady here had a question before we wrap it up.
And healthcare and education, also massive. Sorry.
No, I just had a comment. I'm Anita as well, Anita Rahman, and the other Anita in the room. I work with GSV, and we're in some investments with WestBridge. Just to comment on your question, we are seeing lots of companies that we're funding as well, looking at funding, that are providing parallel paths, parallel education paths to kids coming out of engineering colleges that are not, graduating them as employable. So we have companies like Scalar and Newton School, etc., that are like you'd see in the olden days, the CA program that kids would have to do. They're actually teaching them to be employable engineers. And so we're seeing those companies grow tremendously and churn out lots of talented engineers.
Scalar is awesome, yeah. But great. Thanks, everyone. I hope this was a fun discussion. It was fun for us. So thank you so much for having us.
Our conference next year is going to be brought to you by AI. Thank you, Jonathan, Manhir, Anita, and Samir. It is terrific to see you all so happy to be alive at this time.